I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Teresa and I are going to be sharing with you some fun did you know factoids about our hormone health. We don't stop there. We also talk about fertility. We talk about pregnancy. And so I'm really excited because, again, these are super fun and interesting. And no one likes interesting and fun facts more than Teresa and I. I can just guarantee it. So we're going to share, again, with you all some fun and interesting facts. If there are things that we did not mention, but you just think for sure we need to know, please send us an email at thehormonegenius@gmail.com and share your fun fact with us. So with that, Teresa, let's say we get rolling.
Yeah, let's do it. So do you want to start, Jamie, or do you want me to start? I think we talked about like kind of trying to do this in a little bit of category. So we're going to start with some fertility facts. Again, this is going to be a little all over the place. This is just for fun. We just want to kind of help some things stick a little bit in terms of maybe what you haven't heard about your fertility and reproductive system. So I guess I could just start, Jamie.
Yeah, go for it, girl.
So one of the things that, I learned in kind of these fertility facts is just that the egg itself, the female egg. So there's some amazing things about female eggs. One, they start, you start developing your own eggs when you're in your mother's, developing in the womb. So you have like 1 to 2 million, what we call primordial eggs. So they're not developed, but you have millions of them. And then by the time you're born, you're kind of left with actually more like 500,000, 400 to 500,000. And then it's thought that you will only use somewhere around 400 in your lifetime as actual ovulation eggs. So it's interesting that we're born with millions and we end up only using hundreds, And they've always thought that kind of this, the mantra has been that you're born with all the eggs you'll have for an entire lifetime. However, Jamie, there's some new research that may actually contradict this. Now, this is new stuff, but they have found in animal models that there is something that is a stem cell that actually can produce oocytes, so primordial eggs in a sense. And so they have found the same kind of enzyme or what the stem cell is in actual humans, but they haven't proven yet that women can actually make eggs after they're born. But there is a thought that we have had this a little wrong, that like maybe you're not necessarily born with all of your eggs, that you might be able to make eggs while you're alive. And so that was just a fun fertility thing that, again, hasn't been proven. But if you look it up, you can see people talking about it in kind of the fertility space.
Oh, Teresa, that makes me think of all the things we all think we know, but we don't.
Yeah.
How many facts and even things in our lifetime that have changed. We talk about it a lot with like the wheat thin era and how that's supposed to be healthy because it's low fat. And even that's just an example we use a lot. But even in our time of living, that this has happened and it's going to happen even more. And so, wow.
I was just listening. This just reminds me, Jamie, it's such a cool story. I'm sure you've heard this, like how we got it wrong so badly on the peanut allergy thing.
Oh, with babies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't give them peanut butter before the age of 1 or whatever, because they'll get a peanut butter allergy.
Science to give that recommendation. It just was a gut instinct.
What?
They were like, well, if kids are like, we're seeing these allergies, we should just not expose kids to peanuts at all. But like the science and immunology, those researchers were like, this doesn't really make sense. But so it backfired completely. So now the recommendation has changed. But for years and years, they saw peanut allergies skyrocket because they thought if they just had all babies and children abstain from eating peanuts, that would protect them from peanut allergies. But the exact opposite happened. Anyway, that's just one of those things like science, like we are, always kind of like learning and changing, and you can never be quite sure. Like always kind of be like, yeah, I think this is truth, but always maintain somewhat of a balance / like questioning view of everything.
Yes, yes. Like hold them loosely. Hold these things loosely, not so tight a grip. I always get nervous when I see, maybe health influencers create such a big deal about a specific niche thing. And I'm like, oh dear, like they're not holding that one loose at all. And maybe they're 100% right and they could be very wrong. So it's very interesting.
Totally.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about progesterone's impact on the brain. Teresa, I actually brought this up yesterday during a convo with a gaggle of gals, and we were talking about hormones impacts on the brain. And this one just stuck with me. When I learned it, I thought, yeah, that's cool, but I'm going to share it with you all because I actually can't stop thinking about it now that I've learned it. So, progesterone, we know has an impact on the brain. We know that. But the thing I'm going to share is what I can't stop thinking about. Okay, so progesterone can dampen the brain's reward system. So higher progesterone levels post-ovulation, of course, that's when our progesterone levels are high, can correlate with mood swings or reduced motivation because I think, this is my theory, dopamine. Dopamine. If our progesterone is dampening our reward system, then maybe it means we need more sugar than the sugar that we'd normally eat, or maybe it means we argue more than we might normally argue. So again, this could be one of those loosely held things, but I just think that is interesting along, of course, side the progesterone's effect with the brain and our neurotransmitters, which is also one of the facts. I'm going to punt that one to you in regards to like our GABA neurotransmitters and progesterone.
Yeah, I mean, progesterone is something that they know is what we call an anxiolytic. It calms down anxiety. And we know that like the GABA receptor site is where kind of like you can get almost these excitatory neurotransmitters that can make people feel anxious. And progesterone calms that down and regulates the GABA receptors. So what's cool about this, Jamie, is a new fact kind of that has emerged is that there is a similar chemical to progesterone called allopregnanolone. And you've probably heard of allopregnanolone. It's actually the urinary byproduct of progesterone. But they have seen that it helps with postpartum depression. And so they made it into a FDA approved medication for postpartum depression called brexanolone. However, brexanolone is hard to get. You have to get it as an IV. But they just came out, Jamie, with alpregnalone for oral use for postpartum depression. And why this is interesting, and Jamie, is that finally, like modern medicine has figured out how beautiful progesterone is, because these chemicals are almost exactly the same to the brain and making us feel calm and happy. And so I think this is going to really help the progesterone in its use be seen and in other aspects of being used for premenstrual syndrome, especially for PMDD, those types of things. So that's all good news for progesterone and its effect on the brain.
Cool. So question about that quick, Teresa. So how would that differ in its effect to just taking progesterone?
It's really not. It's almost exactly the same. And that's the thing. They're so similar. They have basically the same modulating effect. But unfortunately, like modern medicine didn't really realize that natural progesterone was so beautiful in doing that. They went to alpregnalone, and I'm not exactly sure why they missed the boat that, hey, we've got this thing called progesterone that works very similar.
Got it. So it's more of like applauding, not natural, but modern medicine now for acknowledging and recognizing that there is value here. Totally. So that's awesome. Totally. Awesome. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. Well, I'm going to share, going again into the brain whole thing, Teresa, that our brain as women, we're far more sensitive, even just in general, compared to men. So we talked about just now, our progesterone kind of dampens
our reward center in our mind and in our brain. But smell, sound, and vision, we actually have better smell, sound, and vision than men. And so it's very interesting. So if those of you who are pregnant and you just cannot stand a certain smell, this is the body's way of protecting you. Or if in your vision, whether you're pregnant or not, women tend to have better color perception. So we're more sensitive to subtle changes in hue. And it's that whole like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Like men are like, yeah, that's purple. And we're like, no, it's magenta. Or, and this makes sense now because even from like the evolutionary world and our history, it makes sense that we would be gathering the berries and we would need to know the difference between ripe fruit, unripened fruit, maybe there's rotting fruit. So just the fact, it's so cool that we have a higher intensity of color that we truly see, and it is for survival.
Yeah,
And then what?
it makes
Yeah, go
sense.
ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, like,
Yeah.
there was, I don't know if it's a book or somebody had talked about this, but they call it like a neurotic. Like women can be neurotic. And that sounds like a negative word, but honestly, like you can spin it on its head and be like, it's a positive thing. Being neurotic when you have to protect your child from being eaten by
Yeah.
tigers and bears would be an incredibly useful virtue, or like how
Totally.
would you say that? But so
Mhm.
I, like you said, some of these things that who we are as men and women are built in for an evolutionary purpose for a world that we don't live in anymore.
Exactly. It's so cool. And
Yeah.
even just with our smell, like we have 50% more neurons in the olfactory bulb. So even, we are obsessed with the new baby smell, and that we can recognize our baby's scent even by closing our eyes if compared to other babies. And the sound, the sound of crying of our own child, that we can recognize that. It gives us like that heightened auditory processing that, again, men just don't have it. If any of you are married, and Teresa, I'm sure you've noticed it too, but like guys can sleep through a baby crying and ask a mom to do that. That will not happen for the most part. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, along that same line, Jamie, the next thing I'll bring up is because it has to do with kind of a difference in men and women as well, is like women have double the amount of nerve endings in the area where we would experience sexual pleasure. So the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings compared to the male penis, which has 4,000. So, I mean, there's a fertility fact. I don't know if you wanted to know that, but it is like, wow, okay, that's a big difference. And I don't know what the evolutionary purpose is for it, but let's just say thank you.
Yeah. And something along that line too is that the sole purpose of this tiny little organ for us, or would you call it what would you call it?
That, well, it is an organ. It is a gland. I
Just
would
the
call it
tiny
probably an organ or
little,
gland, but it's not that small, Jamie. It's
oh, right,
actually,
because it's
yeah,
like
I think that's another
iceberg.
kind of myth about the clitoris. It's
Yeah.
actually almost 3 to 4 inches long, and it
Yeah.
expands like from behind. We don't see it. We only see the very, what they call the tip or the bulb
Yeah.
of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it's like under the surface, you know.
Mhm.
But what I was gonna say about that is that, I hadn't appreciated this organ as much as I do now currently after hearing this fact that there is no other use for it besides for pleasure for women. For men, they have a penis, they urinate, there's other functions, of course, like obviously penetration, pleasure, yada yada. But with the clitoris, the sole purpose, one could say, is for pleasure. And that's important in a marriage to acknowledge that and know that. And again, if you want to learn more, listen to Sarah Bartels when we interviewed her
Yeah.
about, female sexuality and orgasms. I'm sure we went into for sure.
Yeah.
So look into that more.
Yeah, it was good. And she had some great resources as well. Okay. I think it's your turn, right?
Okay, okay, all right. So going along kind of the sperm line, there are different types of sperm, Teresa. So the first time I heard this, I was at a conference and I was on a speaking team with this lady named Vicky Thorne, who has since passed away, and she was a huge role model to me. And everything she talked about, I just wanted to know more of. And so I just was so astounded when she started talking about the different types of sperm. And there are, because I always just thought there was one, Teresa. There's like the sperm. Just it's a sperm and it goes to the egg and bada bing, bada boom, we're done. But no, that's not true. There are different types of sperm. So there's egg getters and they fertilize the egg. There's fighters who protect against rival sperm. So if a woman was exposed to, multiple sperm from different men, then there are fighters that protect against the rival sperm. There are decoys or blockers. And then there are mutants, which I think the name of, I just imagine a children's book. You should have your husband.
Right. It sounds like the Marvel movies. Like
Yeah.
it could be a Marvel movie where we just have different types of sperm heroes and bad guys.
That would be awesome. That would be incredible. And
I'm not sure it would be awesome. I think it would be kind of weird, but
your husband would probably, I bet your husband.
yeah, he would have fun with it.
He probably would have fun with it. So yeah, I love that about sperm. And I love too that our cervical mucus is just incredible in that it keeps the healthy egg getting sperm on the straight and narrow path to the egg itself. And so our cervical mucus, when you look at it under a microscope, they look like little swimming channels when our estrogen levels are high. And so that's, again, this beautiful way of protecting almost, in a sense, us from, or our egg from fertilizing with a quote unquote mutant. But again, there's more to that whole process that we can talk about. But I just think it's, again, very beautiful how our body's made in that way. So cool.
Yeah. And one of the fertility facts that I found that will go with this is just the immune system of the uterus and the fallopian tubes that is a part of kind of this kind of weeding out and getting to the point where you have the right sperm, right?
Yeah.
And apparently our immune systems and the female immune system, in particular the uterus and the tubes, is so good. And it has so many different enzymes and proteins that are searching out that it can actually determine which sperm has the better DNA. Like it is literally sniffing out DNA quality. So by the time so like again, in active intercourse, deposit millions of sperm in the vagina. And we know that most of those don't even go past that point.
Right.
So you might get 500 to 1,000 through that point, through the cervix into the uterus. And then in the uterus, what's going on is like this immune system symphony where there is this like contracting and there's contracting of the uterus to push up sperm. So it's like, I think I saw an article where it says it's like riding the wave. So it's riding the wave. And even in the uterus, and I didn't know this, Jamie, that there is, we use this word called cilia. Mm-hmm. These are like little wave hair-like little projections off of cells. And they line not only the fallopian tube, because I knew they were in the fallopian tube, but they line the uterus cells too. And when that uterus contracts, there's like a wave happening also that's pushing things upward. And when the body is normally not open to conception, so in infertile periods, the contracting is going the opposite way to prevent infection, to prevent things from getting in the uterus that shouldn't be in the uterus. I mean, crazy.
That is crazy.
And then if you get some of those sperm, like maybe 50 to 100 that get past that point through the uterus into the fallopian tube, even at that point, there is the immune system at work to determine which sperm is going to be the best sperm to fertilize that egg. And there is in the tube a junction right in the middle. So the fallopian tube is about the size of a sewing needle. It's about 10 to 12 inches long. And in the middle, there is this junction where conception occurs. But as you are looking at both ends of the tube, the cilia, or those little wave-like finger projections, are pushing one way from the outside and one way from the inside so that the sperm and the egg meet in the middle. So if you were watching my hands right now, you would see I'm like feathering both ends of my hands together to the middle, right? Because if it's the tube on both sides, the body's pushing those two elements together to create this incredible new human being in that fallopian tube. Yeah.
Right. And I even want to reiterate that conception happens in the fallopian tube, because I think that's a part that I didn't realize when I was in high school and, human health and biology, yada, yada. I didn't know that. I think a lot of people probably don't realize that, but it makes sense. It makes sense that you would need a narrow path to get to the egg. And it's even cooler, like you're saying, that there's these little finger-like projections, or like these little cilia, I should say, kind of encouraging the sperm and egg to meet there. It's such a romantic moment, Yeah, such a romantic moment. It makes me think of high school or even probably middle school dances where like the women are on the right side, the guys are on the left, and they're like pushing like this one gal and this one guy toward the center so they can dance. I mean, so it's such a beautiful romantic moment, I'd say.
Very true.
I love that. And again, we have a lot to talk about in regards to sperm. We just have a lot of fun facts to share.
Guys are getting their shout out on our show.
I mean,
guys, you're
dang.
important. We do not want to miss an opportunity to tell you how important you are.
Yeah,
you really are.
Exactly.
I mean, like, we don't sometimes, again, we believe like the world is better because there are both of us. There are men and women, and we work together as a team. And when it comes to fertility, that has to be the case. We work as a team.
Exactly. Okay. So one thing I didn't realize about sperm, and it makes sense when you think about it, I just didn't give it much thought, that our sperm, not our sperm, but men's sperm count and quality peaks in the early morning at 7:30 a.m. And again, I don't know why I didn't think of that, but I remember you saying, Teresa, that, well, men have their highest level of testosterone right in the morning, perhaps, and maybe that again helps with waking up and being motivated and can potentially, having intercourse with your wife and having a baby soon, 9 months later. But I love what I'm learning about sperm, because again, I personally haven't spent much time thinking about sperm besides years ago when I learned about the different types. And I know you have something fun to share in terms of the sperm changes with the seasons.
Yeah, something I totally never knew, Jamie.
Yeah,
is that
crazy.
Apparently, that in the winter and the fall, or when it's cooler, that sperm counts are generally lower. Are generally higher, sorry. So, but in the summer months when the temperature is hotter, that the counts and the speeds of the sperm actually slow down. So there is a seasons to sperm count. Now, I'm sure it's never enough change to actually probably affect fertility, but as we know, sperm counts have declined, or maybe you don't know this, sperm counts have declined by 50% and somewhat higher in some respect than it was 100 years ago. So they're concerned about any changes in sperm. And so we want to look at like, what is like all the things you need to have healthy sperm too. And so the right temperature, and that's why sperm are created outside the man's body in the testicles, which are outside the body, because it's 2 to 3 degrees cooler on the outside of the body. And that's where sperm are most suited to live.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So interesting. And like we even think about like hot tubs and hot saunas, and that's just something to be thinking about, especially if your sperm count could be low. Very good. All right. So we talked about the morning advantage. We talked about sperm changing with the seasons in terms of the count. One thing I forgot to mention about sperm, but I think it's interesting and very cool when it's working toward navigating to the egg, that there are chemical signals from the egg that they're sending out to attract the sperm, and that's called chemotaxis.
Yeah.
So they are it's almost like, I imagine, a magnet, like, come to me, come to me, come to me. So again, that along with the cilia, again, going back to that point I didn't want to forget, but so incredible. And again, I could just imagine doing a whole other episode potentially on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's change gears. Let's just do a random one. And this is so random, but did you know that redheads are more tolerant of some types of pain, but also have a harder time with anesthetics and are resistant to pain, like lidocaine and like anesthetics, because of a gene that redheads have? And this is something that like, okay, so if you like are slightly redhead or your family comes from redheads, have you ever thought when you go to the dentist that they keep numbing you up, but you're still not numb? Because redheads will tell you this. And a lot of like even dentists and doctors, I don't think know this. And so you are supposed to get different types of anesthetics and also sometimes more anesthetics when you have this gene mutation, which made you a redhead. So anyway, and I've seen it in practice. My redheads, I'm always like, oh man, they don't numb up the same way. Anyway,
Oh
that's
my
totally
gosh.
random.
Yeah, no, I love that random fact. Another random fact, again, you shared this with me. Oh, gosh, and I don't want to steal it from you. The tomato thing.
Oh,
Can I say
please.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, so cool. Again, I'll never eat a tomato like as joyfully as I was able to in the past after knowing this. But it's cool. So our vagina has a very similar pH to that of a tomato. And that is so cool because of two things. One, the acidic balance in the vagina protects against infection. But when we experience our cervical mucus, guess what that pH is of that cervical mucus? It's more alkaline, which is incredible because our body needs to, or it wants to, accept that sperm into our body. And with acidity, it would kill off the sperm. So seminal fluid is also alkaline. Our cervical mucus is alkaline, and that's how this process works too. So it's very multifaceted, which again I think is interesting. But again, the tomato pH level same as the vagina, and I think that is very interesting.
Yes. And maybe some of you know that the microbiome of the vagina is made up of different bacteria we call lactobacillus. And lactobacillus makes lactic acid. And lactic acid is what creates a lower pH or an acidity in the vagina. So that's why it is acidic. So you need healthy amounts of lactobacillus. So sometimes when you've had yeast infections or infection, sometimes we'll tell people to take a lactobacillus strain probiotic to try to repopulate that.
Very cool. All right, you're up, I think.
Did you know, Jamie, that there are only about 85 mammals that actually menstruate, and that's only 2% of all mammals that actually have a menstrual cycle?
Yeah. It's
I
crazy.
think I knew, and we probably won't go down this rabbit hole because neither Jamie and I are veterinarians or animal people experts. So we're just going to state this and then not go down a rabbit hole. But there apparently is just not very many animals that menstruate, but the few that do besides humans are like the elephant shrew, the spiny mouse, certain bats, which none of this even makes any sense to me. But then we know like some dogs do. But anyway, I guess it just is not that common in that not all mammals menstruate. There's all sorts of types of fertilization and reproduction, and we should probably go back to learn about that.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. All right. I'm going to throw a zinger at you. Actually, I mentioned this in the last episode we released about uterine, nope, not just uterine, but prolapse in general. What was the phrase?
Pelvic organ prolapse.
Thank you. Pelvic organ prolapse. So if you haven't listened to that episode, feel free to do that. But I mentioned Lysol, and you might be wondering, what on earth are you mentioning Lysol for, Jamie, on a Hormone Genius Podcast episode? Well, here's the deal. Earlier on in the 20th century, women used Lysol as quote unquote a feminine hygiene product. But really what they were using it for was like the contraception for sure, but like a douche-like effect. So they would spray themselves after intercourse in hopes to kill off any sperm or potential life. Obviously, they became very sick and poisoned and burned. But if you even go back into Google, if any of you guys listening are interested in learning about this, just search Lysol and birth control. You will find ads that pop up. Teresa, I'm going to read some to you. Okay. So this is a little ad in a newspaper, okay? Or in a magazine. This is what it said. She was, and a lady in the front looking very distressed. She was a jewel of a wife with just one flaw. She was guilty of the one neglect that mars most marriages. And that's fertility. Her ability to get pregnant. That's
No.
what it was. Yes. And there are so many, Teresa. Like so many ads.
Oh,
Crazy.
so sad. Goodness
So
gracious.
sad.
Okay, well, that just tells you that, again, we went down a road and we on the Hormone Genius podcast are trying to flip this on its head and tell you as women that your fertility is a good. And it's
Yes.
not just a good because it's a beautiful thing to be able to have this procreative power, but it's also healthy. And we're going to do an episode on why your fertility makes you healthy as well here coming up. But okay, that's crazy. And yes, please, no one use Lysol for any other reason than I don't know, because now
Maybe
we're
not
probably,
even.
maybe not even anymore. We're like going non-toxic cleaners anyway. So
Yeah.
let's just get rid of that stuff.
Mhm.
Well, this is fun. This is going to go into the fertility thing. There is, okay, it's hard to believe this, but it is in the Guinness World Book of Records. So
Oh,
take it or leave it from that standpoint. There is a woman and she gave birth. Her name is Halima Cisse, and I can't remember the country. It might be Morocco, but I can't remember that. But she gave birth to 9 healthy babies in one delivery, Jamie, that was naturally conceived. So if
oh
you
my
want to know,
gosh.
like again, this is like the fun stuff I like to look up. Who gave birth to the most babies in the world, right? Naturally, there is a woman who had non-tuplets, which is 9. Which is 9. They thought she was going to have 7. They thought there were 7 in there, but when they actually delivered them, there were 9, and they're all alive.
Crazy.
So that was kind of insane. And anyway,
Wow.
I still like I'm like, what was she? If it was natural, like sometimes you just want to know what herb or what were you ingesting that made that happen.
Yeah, no kidding. Holy mackerel. That is insane. Okay, I'm trying to decide if I should go down the pregnancy route or if I should let's I'm gonna say one more pregnancy one. And again, you taught me this, Teresa, but the world's oldest natural mother was 59 years old. And that's very interesting because not only did she conceive and have a healthy baby, as far as what I remember you telling me, Teresa, but the fact that she had, of course, she was still menstruating, and she was 59 and her baby's healthy. And did you say that the child is still living? It's probably like an adult now, perhaps.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think when
Yeah.
they tell the stories, I mean, at least they were born alive and lived. I mean, I can't tell you if they're still alive. And I think she might have been, I want to say 57, not 59,
Oh,
where
okay.
that fact was. But close enough. But I think it was 57.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy.
and
And
that
you know
was
what?
the natural. Like again, there's been a woman that
Yes,
apparently
yes.
at the age of 70, but this was through in vitro fertilization, but natural conception. And again, these are so rare that yeah, I mean, even the general like consensus is that if you are not having periods and you are the age of 53, like there is no reason to ever worry about being pregnant, really.
Right.
Um,
And you would
so
imagine this gal would be having her period still. Like she didn't think she was in a state of menopause and then became pregnant, obviously. So she would have been seeing these cycles, you know.
you would
You would
think,
think.
yeah.
One thing I remember, too, I just want to say, and I think this is a very good point. Anytime I have a friend or a relative and they're very, very fertile. And just like being infertile can be very, very hard and very difficult, and or struggling with conceiving. On the opposite end, it can be also very difficult to have hyperfertility. And so I have a couple friends that it just seems like no matter really what they do, they achieve pregnancy. And again, we know that every life is a gift, but it's a hard pill to swallow at times. But one thing I heard that I just thought this is a comfort, and I share this with them, is when we can be hyper fertile for the women who find themselves hyper fertile. And we're going to be talking about this in the next episode about how it's healthy to ovulate, how it's healthy to be a fertile person. The state of our reproductive organs give us information about the state of our organs in
Mm,
general.
mm.
And so I thought that was so comforting, even though, maybe, there's a friend of mine who she's had 13 children and she has not gotten pregnant in the last couple years. She is 50 now. So we'll see what happens. But I think, man, her organs and her body systems are bomb.com. My word. So I'm like, don't worry, all your body systems are great because if they mirror your reproductive system, you're in good hands. See, I don't know if that's scientifically proven, but I like the idea of it.
Yes, that's a good point, Jamie. Yeah. I mean, I think there is some evidence that, pregnancies can make a woman healthy, but there might be some other evidence out there the other
Yeah.
way. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jamie, on the opposite end of being old, apparently the youngest person to have ever given birth was only 5 years,
Mm.
5.5 years old. And
Yeah.
this was, again, a Guinness World Book of Records, but it was in 1939 in the country of Peru. A girl had gone into something called precocious puberty. This is where you well go into puberty before the age that normally girls would. And this apparently led to her conceiving a child at 5.5 years, and she gave birth to that child, and that child lived to the age of 40. So, and it's apparently she's still alive. She doesn't talk about it. And again, obviously, the nature of the conception is concerning at that age. And there was, some controversy about that, and it never came out what happened there. But anyway, hard to believe, but that if you just want to know a fact about
Wow.
was the youngest, I can't even. But and
Yeah,
she
I
was
can't.
delivered via cesarean, but again, very healthy baby.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I cannot even. Ugh. Oh, such a hard, weird thing. But wow. Uh, Speaking of weird things, I don't know if that's a good enough transition, Teresa, but we'll take it. There was a Russian peasant who, along with his first wife, okay, I have to admit something. When you said you've been looking up the Guinness, I call it Guinness. What do you call it? Guinness Book of World Records?
Guinness. I don't know. Is
Guinness
that a
Book of
beer though? I don't know.
I
It's
don't
Guinness.
know.
Say Guinness when we talk about the beer.
It's one of the two. So when you said that just now, I'm like, you are brilliant. So I just looked up something quick. So this is not on our list, but I just thought that was smart. Okay, a Russian peasant, along with his wife, were said to have 69 children. So I looked up to see how many kids has a couple, birthed and raised. 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets, and 4 sets of quadruplets. Okay, that is in the Guinness Book of World Records. If you don't believe me, take it up with them. But interesting. How is that even possible? You think like was that well, you can look it
Yeah,
up,
I
but it
don't
was
know. I mean, obviously something weirdly genetically obviously weird about that. But like I do have one patient that I know that has had 3 sets of twins, which I thought that was, and it is
3
incredibly,
sets. Wow.
yeah. So, yeah. So apparently it
Crazy.
happens. It just
Yeah.
blows your mind. And that
Yeah.
it doesn't seem real, but apparently you can see a picture of them if you look it up. I've seen, I found
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I've seen, and it was in 1725 to 1765 was the time of these pregnancies, and it was 27 pregnancies and then resulted in 69 children.
Wow.
Crazy. Crazy,
All right.
crazy.
Well, Jamie, let's take a pause and mention right now our very wonderful premier sponsor, We Heart Nutrition. Speaking of health and fertility, we know that a lot of you are out there listening care about those things and that you want to take good quality supplements. Jamie and I have been using We Heart Nutrition here for several months. I have really enjoyed my, again, magnesium glycinate, my multivitamin for a woman over 40, and my omega-3s. I think it's pretty much all I need. And the quality of supplements is very important. So we really trust We Heart Nutrition. They are family owned. They are also very beautifully philosophically aligned with us, and they care about moms and babies and give 10% of their proceeds back to pregnancy centers. So if you want to support them or get high quality supplements, go to their website, weheartnutrition.com, put in the code GENIUS when you check out, and you will get 20% off your order. So check them out today.
Yeah, we love We Heart Nutrition. I've even been giving the supplements to my 12-year-old daughter, the magnesium glycinate in particular. So it's incredible. Okay, let's switch gears. I know we have a lot. Let's talk a little bit about birth control, and then we can kind of go back and forth and maybe talk about some other things. Okay, here we go. I'm going to ask you to guess what percentage of women change their birth control at least 5 times. It's a fact I say all the time in all my marketing because I think it's so important. It's okay if you don't remember. But what percentage do you think of women change their birth control method at least 5 times? Not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. 5 times.
5 times is a lot. So at first,
It's a lot.
I was going to say a high number, but then when you said it's 5 times, Teresa, 5 times. So I would guess somewhere between I don't know, 15 to 35%, somewhere in there. I mean, because I'm thinking it's a lower percentage, but still kind of a significant percentage. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
30%.
Okay.
30%. So you were really right on the money there. So 30% of women changed their birth control method at least 5 times due to side effects. What does that tell us? It tells us that often women don't like the way it feels when they're on birth control. They go back, they get another pack, and then they try it. They don't like it. They go back and here, so on and so forth. So then you just ask the question at the 6th time, do they just say never mind? What's a natural way to maybe avoid pregnancy naturally? Or perhaps, again, they're taking birth control for a health reason. But it's so frustrating to go to the doctor anyway. Like, oh, I have strep throat. I have to go to the doctor. It doesn't ever feel great to feel like you have to go back. Or we just got a vehicle and, well, we did last year and there were lots of issues. Always having to take the car back. It's annoying. That's my little soapbox. But there you go, Teresa, 30%.
You're right. Yeah. No one wants to have to be like, we want to go to the doctor, kind of get it solved and not have to return. Like you're
Yeah.
a well person. And birth control, women who are taking birth control are taking it usually as a healthy person, not a sick person. So when it makes you sick,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, well, this isn't working. And that's what's been so frustrating for women is sometimes it feels, I think, that they aren't being listened to. And then that's not always the case, but I think women can feel that way. Well, one of the things, Jamie, that is really influencing this, will go back to the first fertility fact we talked about, which is that progesterone is so beautiful for the brain. It makes us feel calm and it reduces anxiety and depression. But the hormones in the pill do the exact opposite. So the synthetic progestin that's in the pill, that's not like our natural progesterone, leads to anxiety and depression in many women. And out of all the reasons why I think women might stop the pill, I mean, I think anecdotally, for sure, I feel like it's the mood changes. It's how they feel in the head sometimes that makes them want to change, not necessarily something physical.
Yeah. So frustrating. Well, did you know that 23% of women are more likely to be prescribed antidepressants compared to non-users when a woman is on the birth control pill? So you're right, 100%. We're just feeling like we're losing our mind. We don't feel like ourselves. And that's a frustrating thing to feel, especially this day and age, Teresa. Like, you're a working mother. I mean, you have some kids out of school and you have some kids still in the home, and you have 8 children. You're married, and life is busy and life can be hard. And as a mother, especially, we kind of carry the emotion and difficulty of our children, and our husbands do too, fathers do too. But I think mothers do in a very special way that makes it burdening at times. And so it can be so hard to also throw in that depression for again, the sake of not, just for the sake of not knowing other options. It's just a bummer.
If you want to know more stuff about the brain and birth control, look up Sarah Hill's work. It's called Your Brain on Birth Control. But, if you just look at kind of even in neuroscience, I mean, what they're seeing about these synthetic hormones, that it actually can change the physical structure of the brain when you're on it. So changes in the volume and the thickness of specific brain regions, such as your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala and your hippocampus. There are actual physical changes when people take synthetic hormones. This is something we should be asking questions about, right? And there was a National Geographic article called "The Menstrual Cycle Can Reshape Your Brain." So they know that also natural menstrual cycles, as you go through it, also change the brain. This is all very fascinating. But I think, again, whenever we ingest something that's not a natural part of our body, we want to know what it really does. And I think, this work that Sarah Hill's doing, and then people asking the question of, how is this really affecting us? And I know, Jamie, you probably have read about this and maybe you can speak to it, but we know that women on the pill, in the way that they actually think, or at least make decisions, that they know by research that women will choose different kind of mates, or different, at least kind of be attracted to different types of men when they're on birth control versus not on birth control. And this is a fascinating kind of new fertility kind of fact that hasn't been all completely thought out, but initial thoughts are, wow, this is a big deal.
Yeah. It's very interesting. They did a white t-shirt study where they had a bunch of men wear a shirt for 3 days. They wore it all day. They slept in it. They could not wear deodorant. They could not bathe. And then they would have a group of women who are on the pill and who were not on the pill smell the shirts. And then they would rate each shirt based on how attracted they were to the aroma of the t-shirt. And so again, a group of women who were on the pill, a group of women who were not. What they found was that the women who were not on the pill, they were attracted to the scent of the male who had the most dissimilar genetics, their genome or whatever. So genetically dissimilar, most genetically dissimilar. What do we know about being attracted to somebody that's the most genetically dissimilar? Well, the offspring is more likely to have strength. We think about why brothers and sisters aren't attracted to one another to want to have children. I mean, that's a big extreme case, but that's true. You're not attracted to your brother, and the brothers aren't attracted to their sisters. Okay. But they found that the group of women who smelled the t-shirts that were on birth control, they were actually attracted to the men who were more genetically similar. So it threw off their ability to sense out, in my opinion, like the most preferred mate. Obviously, when I share this fact, and I love to share this fact, but I also share it cautiously when I talk to especially married people, because many of my friends, and I would have likely been too, I mean, on the pill, getting married, and then maybe I get off the pill, and there can sometimes be tension and distress. But here we go. We are body, mind, spirit. We, like our brain and our willingness to put the other one in front of us in terms of, loving them and caring for them. It's not just about, again, that physical, like eager attraction where you just want to rip them apart. But that would be nice though. So it's not all about that, but we call it the Romeo and Juliet effect. It's like we just are so obsessed with each other. And one part of that could be because of the pheromones. And again, that's an odorless molecule that attracts us to one another.
So fascinating. And obviously, we do want to do more research to understand that better because I think people do care about that, obviously. But yeah, we're not trying to alarm anybody, but this is something we should probably ask questions about. Totally. This is totally off topic, but sometimes we just got to divert. But I did not know this, Jamie, and I learned this when looking stuff up. But did you know that we actually evolved to be able to drink cow's milk? We actually were not evolutionary created to drink milk, which makes sense because we're the only mammals that continue to drink milk after we're weaned from our mother's milk source. And now we have a mutation that allows us to have that enzyme called lactase that breaks down lactose so that we can digest the milk. And that was a mutation. I did not know that.
Isn't that so crazy? Just how our species can evolve, But, and it also depends too, genetically, where you're from, like your origin. So Europeans have more of that genetic weakness, genetic variant, whatever, to be able to process milk as opposed to people in Africa. Most Africans may be more lactose intolerant. So it also is based on the region in which you live in the world on how well you tolerate dairy. And what's also very interesting too is, in America, we always talk about low sugar, low sugar, low sugar. And genetically, probably that is correct because, again, of where we all maybe we're from. Maybe many of us are from kind of, the European area. But people, again, that live in Africa, they do fine with sugar. They do fine. And they're out in the sun. You think about, again, ancestry and their origin, and you think about running and hunting and being outside. I mean, they need more energy because they're outside in the sun and it's so hot. And, so it's so interesting that our health really, the way we make healthy decisions really can and should be based on our genetics. I think we're getting there, in terms of research and science, but it's just so interesting.
Very interesting. Well, Jamie, what other facts do you have, if any? Do you have any left? Otherwise, I think
We
we're getting close to
do.
the end.
Yeah, man. Okay, let me do a quick scroll through here. You mentioned oh my gosh, this one. The super fetation. I
Oh,
don't think you said that
yes.
one. Let's
Yeah.
end with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I
Maybe
mean,
not.
many of you like probably heard about this, but just even in the last like few years, there was a case that was on national media that was about a woman who had a pregnancy with twins, but the twins were different ages in utero. So she conceived one pregnancy, was growing that pregnancy, but then became pregnant while already being pregnant. And there is a very rare phenomenon where this can happen, and it's called superfetation. And it's where like almost like the body is holding on to a an egg that it just releases within a couple months after already the fertilization of the first pregnancy occurs. So it's there's only been like around 10 or more confirmed cases. And when it happens, though, it's just interesting because they just have to like decide when to deliver them, depending on how far apart the two babies were. But look it up. There are pictures of babies that have been born in the last few years that were born at different ages, but in the same pregnancy.
Isn't that interesting? Because we always talk about how, you cannot ovulate twice in a cycle,
Yeah.
and you can within a 24-hour time period, like if you have twins or triplets or whatever. And in the most rarest of cases, there could be an exception. But again, you said 10 confirmed cases, like
Yeah.
ever, as far as we ever have known.
Yeah. And I
Crazy.
think those people actually did get like a period. Like it was a separate ovulation, right? So it's not even like
Oh,
it
yeah.
kind of keeps true to the like you can only release one ovulation in one menstrual cycle, right? You can release more eggs in one ovulatory event. There's one ovulatory event per cycle per se, but this situation would be another ovulatory event. It just the pregnancy wasn't able to suppress it. Where normally when you're pregnant, your body knows and it suppresses all future ovulation until well past not being pregnant. So just very crazy. There's always something to break the rule. There's always some fun scientific crazy miraculous thing that we can learn about that the human body does. And so that's why we did this episode, just to have some fun.
Exactly. Teresa, I have a question here quick.
Yeah.
You know how people have heart-shaped uteruses?
Yes.
They can be heart-shaped. Is it possible, and again, we probably don't know the answer because again, there's only 10 cases. And can people have a double uterus? Literally. Can there be two sets of reproductive organs? I mean, obviously there's one brain and there's one signal, so you would assume if you do have two, they probably are acting in the same ways. But have you seen that?
Yes, it's called a didelphys uterus. It's two uteruses, two uteri, and you can have two cervix, two cervixes. That's not how you say it.
Gosh.
And you can have two vaginas, and you can have two pathways towards those uteruses and two cervixes. And yes, and I've actually had a case like that. It's very rare, but I've also, so it can kind of show itself in different ways. You can't just have two uteruses. And I've had a patient with that who had pregnancies in both uteruses. So, like, meaning that like one pregnancy was one uterus, one pregnancy was the other uterus. And I am sure it's possible to probably have pregnancies in both at the same time, although that would just be crazy rare. But yes, that is a genetic, obviously, abnormality that would have happened at the time of embryonic development when you're developing that reproductive system as a female, that there was something that just kind of didn't quite happen the way it split correctly. Right. Yes, but it is something that happens, and but can be fixed and can be dealt with, and is not like necessarily like you're infertile. You can still be fertile.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Teresa, with that, I had so much fun. This was great. I hope that our listeners, again, if you have just an incredible fact that you want to share, and let's say it's so mind-blowing, Teresa, and we are just in awe of it, I just pretty much guarantee we'll find a way to bring it in to some sort of episode. So let that be a challenge to you. If you're listening to us and you're like, oh my word, I want to share an incredible thing. And bonus points if you include the source that you got it from. That's bonus, definitely, because that's always crucial. All right. Well, Teresa, thanks for brain busting with me, sharing some trivia and some did you knows, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel, so if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.